Okay, let's get started. Hello, everybody. Welcome to councillors and to those members of the public listening to this remote meeting of Lewes District Council's Cabinet. My name is James McCleary. I am leader of the council and I'm also the Cabinet member responsible for regeneration and prosperity. I'm going to give my councillor colleagues an opportunity to introduce themselves, to state their particular roles. When you introduce yourselves, could you just make sure that you confirm whether you need to declare a interest on today's agenda, please. I will do a roll call of everybody, and just to kick us off, I can declare that I have no interest to declare on this agenda today. Roll call of members, if I could just start with you, Councillor Bird.
Good afternoon. I'm Matthew Bird. I'm the lead councillor for sustainability, and I have no interest to declare on the agenda this afternoon.
Thank you, Councillor Bird. Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Julie Carr. I'm lead member for recycling, waste and open spaces, and I have no interests to declare on the agenda this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Collier.
I'm Councillor Chris Collier. I'm the Cabinet member for People and Performance, and I wish to declare a personal and prejudicial interest in item 14 on the agenda as a member of Peacehaven Town Council, which will mean that whilst I can take part in the key discussion, I won't be able to vote. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Collier. Councillor Denis.
Good afternoon. My name is Johnny Denis. I'm the lead member for Customer Communities, and I have no interest in to declare in this afternoon's meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Meyer.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Councillor William Meyer. I'm the lead councillor for housing, and I have no issues or items that I have to declare an interest in this afternoon.
Thank you. Councillor Nicholson.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Zoe Nicholson. I'm Deputy Leader and Cabinet Member for Finance and Assets. And I've got no interest to declare on any item on the agenda today.
Thank you. Councillor O'Brien.
Good afternoon. I'm Councillor Emily O'Brien. I'm the lead member for Planning and Infrastructure, and I've got no interest to declare. Thanks.
Great. And Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. I'm Councillor Ruth O'Keefe. I am the lead member for Tourism and Devolution, and I have no interest to declare on this agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. And if I could ask members of the opposition who are attending, I think I can see two members. Councillor Linnington.
Hello, everyone. I'm Councillor Isabel Linnington, and I'm the leader of the Conservative group on the council, and I have no interest to declare.
Thank you. And Councillor Borman.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Councillor Liz Borman, and I'm the Vice Chair of the Policy and Performance Advisory Committee, and I have no interest to declare in this agenda.
Okay, thank you very much for doing that. Can I ask everyone to make sure their microphones are muted when they're not speaking, just to avoid any sort of background noise, which can be a bit confusing, particularly for those who are watching the stream. If you have any connectivity issues, as always, as everybody I imagine knows by now, having all used this technology so much, it can be helpful to turn off your camera when not speaking. Please can all councillors, officers and other participants please clearly state their name when they speak, so it's clear to members of the public listening who is speaking. Can I also ask you, be useful, just let me know when you've finished speaking so we can move on. Any councillor who wishes to speak, please use the raise your hand icon on Teams so I can see you and I can ask you to speak in turn. Thank you, everybody. So starts off agenda item 1, the minutes of the meeting held on the 12th of November. Does anybody have any comments or issues they wanted to raise about those minutes? No, in that case, can I take them as an agreed by the meeting?
Agreed,
Thank you,
Chair.
Thank you. Okay, item 2 is apologies. I have received apologies from Councillors Miller and Peterson. I've also received apologies from Ms Debbie Twitchen, who has submitted questions for the meeting. Are there any other apologies that anybody wishes to convey? No. Okay, great. Thank you very much. We've already dealt with declarations of interest. We have on item 4 urgent items. There are no urgent items for this meeting, which takes us to item 5, which is public question time. We have received some questions from members of the public, which is brilliant because we don't get a huge number of questions to Cabinet. And indeed, this is the first time I think we've had questions in this virtual format. So it's really great. And thank you to the questioners for submitting them. It's wonderful to have them. It's great to see people participating in the meeting. Councillor Nicholson will be responding to the questions. And I will start with Mr. Tony Rowell, who I believe is present at the meeting. If I could ask you to read out your first question to the Cabinet Member for Finance and Assets, please, Mr. Rowell.
Thank you, Chair. My first question is, would you please confirm that all sections of Constitution Part 4 Contract Procedure Rules, Section 18, disposals of interests in land, have been complied with as regards the potential disposal of land to human, I think it's plus nature?
Thank you. Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you very much. I'm Councillor Zoe Nicholson. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Rowell, for bringing these questions, and also to Ms. Debbie Twitchen for bringing these questions. It's really, really important that we get public questions, and it helps us to showcase how transparent we like to operate and what good processes and good governance we have in place. So these kind of questions are absolutely brilliant. Thanks very much. In answer to your first question, before I get there, just want to set out some of the context so that because we're not dealing with item 17 quite in the order in which we would do normally. So look, people listening, members of the public listening, and also Cabinet members and staff will know, and people who live in Lewes will know, that this site has been subject to development for over 20 years. They'll also know that 20 years ago this October, the water rose so high in Lewes that Lewes was flooded in a significantly devastating way that affected both people's lives and their livelihoods for many years to come. And in fact, every time the water rises, and it did in both December 19 and also significantly just a few weeks ago, I so worry. I look out and go, is it going to happen again? And part of the reason why I worry about that is because this development has not come to fruition, because the flood defences are a critical part of that development. Not only that, the GPs who are along the road from where I'm sitting right now in Southover House, plus all the other GP practices in the town, are desperate for for practice space to operate out of that is 21st century fit, and we desperately need more affordable homes and workspaces for people to operate out of. So I'm really glad that we're having this discussion today, and I'm really glad that Mr. Rowell's brought these questions. In answer to your very first question, Mr. Rowell, I can absolutely confirm that Section 18, and just so that people understand what Section 18 is about, Section 18 requires the council to advertise land for sale and to complete a number of critical actions as a part of process of that sale. And I can confirm that we have and will be complying with all aspects of Section 18 as we go through the sale of the land as set out. In particular, one of the requirements is that we advertise the land for sale, and we did that as part of the North Street Quarter Limited procurement that took place in the summer, and that all other actions that are related to Section 18 will be followed as part of the disposal process and will be carried out before the sale.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholson. Mr. Rowell, would you like to ask your second question?
Yes. Please confirm that finance procedure rules, paragraphs 2.1.22 and 3.1.10 have been complied with.
That's the short answer. Yes, they have been complied with.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholson. And Mr. Rao, would you like to ask your third question, please?
I'd like to ask a supplementary to that second question, which I believe I'm entitled to.
Yep, go ahead.
Okay. Given that the answer to that is yes, as the decision to dispose of North Street will result in income of over 500,000, and in accordance with 3.110, which states that prior approval for new proposals of this size must be made at council and to comply with budget and policy framework procedure rules, at which meeting of the council was the decision made?
Thank you, Mr. Rao. Councillor Nicholson, would you like to respond to that now, or should we, or would you like to send a written reply to Mr. Rao on that one?
I think it's probably best to send a written reply to that question to Mr. Rao, although it might be worth bringing in Ian Fitzpatrick into this moment. But let's maybe we could hear the third question and see whether or not that was needed at the end.
Yes, can we have the third question then, please?
Okay. Agenda item 17, paragraph 2.4 states NSQL's agreement to sell its land to Human, I think it's plus Nature, but is therefore dependent on this third party agreeing sale and purchase terms with the council. At the same time, the council's deal with Human Nature is dependent on this purchaser, I think that's reaching an agreement with NSQL. Is the purchase of the land from NSQL by Human Nature dependent on the council selling their piece of land to Human Nature?
Councillor Nicholson.
So again, just for clarity for members of the public, maybe watching or listening to this who perhaps don't understand or perhaps the technicalities of this are a bit out of reach. So the planning policy, which is set by the National Park, we know requires the site to be developed as a whole. So developing it in parts is not an option that's available to us. So, and the marketing to date that has been done by North Street Quarter Limited was done with a sale of the whole site. So if we didn't sell our land to Human Nature, then they wouldn't be able to deliver the development. And it's the development as overall that matters here. So in effect, this makes the purchase of either party's land dependent on the sale of the other. And when we come on to discuss this under item 17, that will become clear as part of the discussion on the heads of terms.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholson. Mr. Rao, do you have a further supplementary on that? And
yes, I do. Thank you. What is preventing Human plus Nature and LDC developing the site together?
Councillor Nicholson, do you want to respond to that?
I think what's behind the question, I mean, we are effectively developing the site together because our heads of terms agreement in our sale has a number of things that must happen as part of that development. So the sale of the land is dependent on Human Nature getting planning permission. So that's a partnership. The other aspect is the inclusion of the health hub within that planning application, and all other important aspects that are for residents are included as part of the will be covered off by the park planning authorities policy. So we are developing it together. If what Mr. Rowell is asking is why are we not a developer or if maybe what Mr. Rowell is asking is the council, does the council want to become a developer? The answer is a straightforward no. What we have here for the first time in 20 years, I believe, is a landowner who has become a landowner of the majority of the site, or is about to become a landowner of the majority of the site, who has the confidence in the current context, which, let's face it, is quite challenging, to develop this scheme as a developer themselves. Whereas in the past, what we've had is landowners who were not interested in developing it, who wanted to appoint another developer. Well, this is the first time that we've got one on the table who wants to do that. And that's the important difference in this new arrangement. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholson. Did you want to bring in the Deputy Chief Executive on the second question?
I think my preference is that we give a written answer so that we absolutely make sure that we've both understood the question, which will be recorded, and that we give a full and written answer to Mr. Rowell.
Lovely. Let's do that. Thank you very much, Mr. Rowell, for your questions. Can I ask the Head of Democratic Services to read the first of Ms. Twitchen's questions. She sent her apologies for today's meeting, so can't be with us, so we're going to have them read out. So could I ask the Head of Democratic Services to read the first question, please?
Thank you, Chair. Simon Russell, Head of Democratic Services. So the first question submitted by Debbie Twitchen is as follows. Agenda item 17, paragraph 2.2 states human nature will not be recruited to act as a developer for Lewes District Council because it will not be entering into a land collaboration agreement in the place of North Street Quarter Limited. Why will human nature not be entering into a land collaboration agreement with the council? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, and thank you, Ms. Twitchen, for bringing these questions to us. So the straightforward answer, I think in a way I've covered it in the earlier answers to some of Mr. Rowell's questions, but is that human nature won't be entering into a land collaboration agreement with the council to appoint a developer because human nature is the developer themselves. So they're a landowner and developer, and therefore there is no need for a land collaboration agreement between us.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholson. Could we have the second question, please, Mr. Russell?
Thank you, Chair. So second question submitted, agenda item 17, paragraph 1.4 states, on the 2nd of April 2020, the Leader of the Council gave delegated authority for the Council to enter into an exclusivity lockout agreement with North Street Quarter Limited as preferred developer. Were human nature the preferred developer at the 2nd of April 2020? Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you. At the 2nd of April 2020, North Street Quarter Limited had not confirmed its preferred developer, and we were actually expecting North Street Quarter to come back to us quite quickly after that cabinet paper happened, but the pandemic obviously was in full flow at that point, and North Street Quarter has now said that it won't be appointing a preferred developer and will instead be entering into a sale agreement with human nature.
Thanks. And can I ask the Head of Democratic Services to read out the last of Ms. Twitchen's questions, please?
Thank you, Chair. So the last question is, under the heads of terms with human nature, how many homes will be built for letting at social rents? Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you. This is a really important question and one that will be subject to South Downs National Parks planning policy, because they will be the planning authority for North Street Quarter, and it's them that set out their expectations for affordable homes. And as we know, as we know from the people will have seen in the press last week, that human nature intend to submit a new planning application. That's good news, because actually the parks plan is actually as a higher standard than the previous than the previous planning application, which was made in 2016. So now any developer will be required to meet 50% of the homes to be affordable on the site. And also what's of note is that the planning application will also have to have regard to the Lewes neighbourhood plan, which has been adopted since the last application. So we as a council don't get to articulate what the amount, type or tenure of affordable homes will be, but we expect to be working closely with the park and with human nature to ensure that we get the best balance that we possibly can on that site as this site comes forward.
Thank you very much, Councillor Nicholson. And as you've already said, thank you again to Mr. Rowell and Ms. Churchin for bringing us those questions today. It's great to have some public questions at the meeting. So that takes us on to item 6, which is written questions from councillors. We don't have any of those. Item 7 is matters referred to Cabinet for consideration by Cabinet, and we have none of those. So that brings us on to item 8. Which is the first report on the agenda, which is on community wealth building. And I'll hand back over to Councillor Nicholson to introduce that item for us.
Thank you, Councillor Zoe Nicholson. I'm really delighted to be able to bring this report to Cabinet today. It's community wealth building is a really key part of our administration's plans and is a key part of it's one of the was one of the 4th parts of our corporate plan. And today what this document does is it brings a number of actions and a detailed action plan that this Cabinet and this Council wants to see taking place and bring into fruition that will support the building of community wealth right the way across our district. And at the same time, all of that supports our goals of achieving carbon net zero position by 2030, not just for us as a council, but us as a district. And of course, what's really exciting is we've been doing this really, and I must thank our officers, including Joe Harper, who I believe is here on the call today, and Ian Fitzpatrick, who have really championed and spearheaded this work across the council, and have also been championing it right the way across East Sussex and also into Greater Brighton. And part of the reason, you can't think of a better reason why it matters even more right now is because of the impact of the pandemic on people's lives and livelihoods, particularly in our district, but all over East Sussex. And essentially what community wealth building means to me is that for every pound that we spend as an authority, we need to ensure that we're spending as much of that as we can locally. For every person that we employ, we need to be working doubly hard to make sure that those people who are furthest away from the job queue get to the front of that job queue. And for every asset that we own, that we use ways of trying to make sure that we benefit the public purse and benefit give social benefit as much as possible. So the plan that's before you has got quite a lot of detail in it. We've worked alongside the Centre for Local Economic Strategies, who are world renowned for their work in this area, and I'd like to thank them for the work that they've done to date. And it's the beginning of something that we will need to be working really closely with over the next few years. So I'm really happy to recommend it to you, and hope that we can engage in a debate and discussion right the way across our district with lots of other partners on how we take these principles forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholson. Can I just invite Councillor Borman to give us any input or recommendations from the Policy and Performance Advisory Committee, please?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Liz Borman. The Policy and Performance Committee discussed this. We felt that £10,000 was a lot of money for this report that was produced, as a lot of it seemed to be common sense, but we did agree to support the recommendations in the report in full. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Borman. And Councillor Linnington, do you have anything to add at this moment?
No, thank you, Chair. I think Councillor Borman summed up everything well.
Lovely. In that case, I open up to Cabinet members. Does anyone wish to make a comment? I can see Councillor Bird was quickest on the draw there.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Matthew Bird. Yeah, I mean, I just want to say, you know, I'm really excited to see this, you know, coming to fruition. You know, I think we've seen recently, you know, some big high-profile failures, you know, on the high street and some of the sort of big names. And you know, so I think a report and an action plan that pulls together actions on sort of local community resilience, you know, and our community wealth building, it's so important at this time. And I suppose, you know, just in terms of kind of one of the specific features of this, I mean, I've been a long time supporter and champion of community energy. Actually, in the past, we helped support Vesco, one of the local energy companies, with our renewable grant scheme. So to actually see the amount of work that they and others that have sprung up since have done, you know, on the community energy scene, and how we're then in turn potentially investing in that and giving opportunities for sort of local training, for local energy, for, you know, all sorts of sort of clean green technologies. It's fantastic. So, you know, really that in itself really shows the value of this approach. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Bird. Councillor Denis.
Councillor Johnny Denis, I'd also like to really welcome this great report and a really good new and strong direction for the council. I think it's particularly helpful having the short and long term, medium and long term actions. So we've got this very clear direction of how we take these things forward. And what stood out for me particularly was the section 6 around the plural ownership of the economy. And I'm so pleased to see so much in there around building social entrepreneurialism, looking for how we can help social startups. So and building community ownership, you know, throughout our economic regeneration. So I'm really pleased, and I'm hoping we can support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Denis. And Councillor Collier.
Thank you, Chair. Just building on what Councillor Denis said with regards to the action plan and how good it is to see those short, medium and long-term goals. If members of the public have got a copy of the action plan, they'll note that already some of the actions are already underway and that we've already got a strategic procurement manager in place. And Claire's have actually noted that we've taken a lead on strategic progressive procurement. They also noted the work that we've been doing on insourcing, both present and in the future, which is obviously key to creating a just labour market. And then we should also mention eat local, shop local and make local, which if you add .info to the back end of, you can find out about and support local food, creative and manufacturing sectors within the district. But finally, I'd just like to add to one of the recommendations if we could. I know that this will already be covered by Joe Harper, but it would be good to have it explicit in the recommendation that we could have a 6-month progress report on the action plan. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Collier. Can I just check first if everybody's happy to accept that amendment, that additional recommendation? Or, yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much. Lovely. Okay, and I'll just my little addition to that, Councillor Nicholson thanked the officers for their hard work, but I think we also, Councillor Nicholson thanks, who has led this piece of work for us and done a remarkable job putting an enormous amount of her own time and energy into it. I think it's an expression of her hard work and capability that we've got to this stage with such an excellent report, which is really exciting and really for me shows some of the potential of what we can achieve even in, let's face it, extremely challenging conditions going forward for business in particular, where we're looking at market conditions which are about as unfavourable as you could imagine, quite frankly, going into next year. And I think it's great that we as a council are able to take a leading role and present some sort of vision and shape to how we might be able to navigate this extremely difficult situation. So thanks to Councillor Nicholson, thank you to the officers, and I'd like to commend the recommendations to Cabinet. Is everybody happy to accept those? Lovely.
Yes.
Thank you all. Okay, so we move on to item 9, which is support for local people in financial distress, and I will hand back over to Councillor Nicholson to introduce this item.
Thank you, Councillor Zoe Nicholson. Thank you, Chair. So I'm really, again, really excited to put this forward to you and its recommendations. I suppose it's worth saying that this set of recommendations actually came from or originated from our Policy and Performance Committee, Advisory Committee, only maybe in early November. So we've been able to act swiftly on their concern about the impact of COVID-19 on our residents. I suppose it is also worth saying that this administration has always planned to offer those on lowest incomes the maximum benefit that we possibly can over council tax, and perhaps to reverse the rather perverse thinking that everyone has to pay for something, even if they can't afford to. And also, just to give you a little bit of context to what's been happening to people in our district. So we've seen a 24% increase in housing benefit claims over the last 4 months. We've also seen a 8% increase in people claiming our council tax relief scheme, and therefore our team has worked really hard, and I'd like to thank Tim Whelan and his team for trying to resolve how we offer, the thinking behind this is what can we do that will help people who are in significant financial distress across our district. And one of the things that's in our gift is how much discount we're able to offer people on their housing benefit, council tax. So and the team has worked really creatively to come up with something, and as a result, the paper sets out a series of options for you. What I'm recommending to you is that we go for option C, which is that we increase the maximum benefit to 90%, and that we continue with the removal of the minimum income floor for the self-employed, much as we did last year. This will help people to be able to pay more of their bills more of the time, and therefore will hopefully improve our collection rates. So I'm really, really delighted to be able to make that recommendation to you today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Nicholson. Councillor Borman, can I ask you for any input from the Policy and Performance Advisory Committee, please?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Liz Borman. We were actually very grateful that Cabinet the other month approved the recommendations from our committee, and that this paper came back so quickly. And we would like to support the recommendations and report in full. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Borman. We were very grateful for the committee's input. It's extremely useful. And Councillor Linnington, would you like to add anything at this point?
Councillor Isabel Lennington. No, as I say, the Conservative Group support the recommendations in the report.
Wonderful, thank you very much. In which case, I'll open it up to Cabinet colleagues. I think I saw Councillor O'Keefe's hand first. Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. I'm sure people will know that it's long been a fervent desire of mine that people on low incomes who were self-employed were not penalised for their type of work. And I'm very, very glad to see that that's not the case. So I would like to thank everybody that's made this possible. Finally, it's a great joy. And the fact that we're actually managing to give people a lower amount to pay if they are employed in any kind of way is also good, because making the thing affordable means more people will pay it. makes sense for us too. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. Councillor Collier.
Thank you, Chair. With social deprivation and in-work poverty, such issues in some of our wards, it's vital that we continue to do everything we can to move this forward. With regards, I'll just come back to Councillor O'Keefe, who's been championing the removal of the minimum income floor for some time. I'm glad that we can and very, very pleased to support continuing that. But obviously, it's vital now that we move to 90%. And I think this is obviously difficult, and officers have worked really hard to get to that point in challenging financial times, but it's a very significant step, and it's going to make a big difference for a lot of people. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Collier. And Councillor Denis.
Councillor Johnny Denis, I'd just like to very briefly welcome such a useful and valuable support for our most vulnerable people at this time. That's really all I had to say. It's so timely. It's really necessary. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councillor Denis, very much. And Councillor Nicholson, did you want to add anything in summation before we go to the recommendations?
No, thank you very much. That's great.
Okay, wonderful. So yeah, let's have a look at the recommendations then. We've got a specific recommendation as Councillor Nicholson outlined in her introduction. I'm happy to commend those to the Cabinet, and I'm grateful for the support of the Policy and Performance Committee and also the opposition on the Council for their support for these recommendations, which I think will make a real substantive difference to people in their lives at this time and indeed going forward. Can I just confirm that all Cabinet members are happy to accept the recommendations?
Yes, Chair.
Agreed.
Yes, happy. Very happy.
Thank you. Okay, in that case, let's move on to the next item, which is item 13 on the agenda. We've moved it up. It's the finance update performance for Q2. So we've just moved on the agenda a little. Councillor Nicholson, back to you.
Thank you, Councillor Zoe Nicholson. Thank you, Chair. This provides Cabinet and members of the public, residents listening, with an update on where we are up to the end of September. So it doesn't make pretty reading. The impact of the global pandemic and the economic crisis that is following is quite significant on the Council. So we're reporting just over a 1.1 million loss, a negative variance at the end of September. This is due to, I know that I'm a bit of a broken record about this, but this is due to two significant factors. One is the loss of income, which sits broadly in car parking and our corporate landlord, so any commercial investments that we've got, and also some increased expenditure. And it's worth noting that the increased expenditure is occurring in our homelessness costs, where effectively the impact of the government subsidy is not enough to cover the costs that we're faced by supporting our residents at this really, really difficult time. And it's worth pointing out that the 1.1 million already takes into account the government grants that we've been given. So we know going forward that revenue is going to take a hit. The report also gives a little bit, there's some minor changes to our capital programme, but they're really quite minor, and some improvements in the HRA account. That's all I wanted to say on that. Thank you, James.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholson. Councillor Borman or Linnington, did you want to add anything or ask any questions about that report?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Liz Borman. I'd just like to say that yes, it's not good to be in a 1 million just over deficit, but it's a lot better than the 10 million that you were predicting a few months ago. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'll open it up to Cabinet members then. Does anybody have any questions or thoughts? Councillor Collier, I can see your hand.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to be clear about some of the money received and maybe ask a cheeky question of Councillor Nichols, and just to clarify something. So we have a 1.1 million shortfall. That obviously includes the 1.2 million emergency COVID grant, the do what it takes money, the amount of money that actually doesn't cover doing what it takes. But the question I had was around the income recovery compensation scheme, which also we have to take a loss of 5% before that scheme even kicks in. Is that right? Can you just clarify that scheme? Because obviously that's going to add to the issues as we move forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Collier. That's nowhere near as cheeky as I'd hoped. You need to try harder for future questions. Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Councillor Zoe Nicholson. Yes, two things. Well, three things really. Of course, Councillor Borman is right. This is this, and I'll cover it actually in the update over where do we think we'll be at year end. You know, it's not. This is a 1.1 million loss. Our 10 million loss was predicted for the whole year. This is obviously the first 6 months, so this is year to date. And we can come back to what's the variances and why is the difference in a bit. I suppose on the question of the, you know, do what it takes money, the do what it takes money has become only paying for what we will agree is actually COVID expenditure loss. That's really how that works out. And the income compensation scheme, effectively in this financial year, we're predicting that the impact of the income compensation scheme will be about half of actually what the loss will be, or maybe even more. And part of the reason for that is because you're right, Councillor Collier, the government expect you to make a 5% loss and just suck that up. The second reason is because after years of pursuing a policy which essentially strips local authorities, particularly actually in district and borough councils, of any government support grants whatsoever, and therefore you know, councils like ourselves have pursued strategies of exploring commercial income. And in fact, our previous administration, you know, we inherit the growth in our commercial income has largely been down to the previous administration rather than ourselves. The income compensation scheme simply doesn't cover that. So we can't include any losses that we're making on our commercial investments, whether that be office space or retail space that we own. That's simply not allowed to be included, which strikes me as deeply worrying and slightly hypocritical that the government allowed us to get into that position. So that's hopefully a straightforward answer to your not so cheeky question.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholson. Councillor Collier, your hand's still up. Did you have an additional point you wanted to make? Take that as a no. Okay, thank you very much, everybody. In that case, I will commend the recommendations to you, which is to note the report and to agree the amended capital programme as set out in Appendix 2 of the report. Can Cabinet members indicate if they wish to dissent from approving these recommendations? Not sure whether to shake your heads or nod them there. That was just sort of throw the negative.
Happy to support, Chair.
That was supported. Thank you. Thanks all. Just move on to the next item then, which is the General Fund Revenue Budget Update, and back over to Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Councillor Zoe Nicholson. So item 10 covers where really it sort of I think provides a bit of an answer to Councillor Borman's questions about why is the variance so different between what we predicted 3 months ago compared to where we are now, and gives a narrative over where are we at the end of this financial year to 2021, and then what does the gap look like going forward into 21-22. I suppose the headline is that we're still predicting, well, so our MTFS predicts a 4 million loss. Where we expect to end up at the end of the financial year is probably about 2.7 million adrift, which, if you think about it, given that we're saying that the net position at 6 months is 1.1 million, then another 6 months is about the same. And that's assuming that, of course, in the next 3 months, we don't have any other significant changes or lockdown. The reason for the difference is threefold. One is that when we were making those predictions, they were based on the absolute worst case scenario, as you would expect us to do. Back in April, we had no idea how long a lockdown would go on, and to be honest, the flow of this over the last 12 months, it would be impossible for any of us, and including our esteemed finance colleagues, to be able to predict what even the best case, let alone the worst case scenario was. The second difference has been the savings plans that our officers have put in place, trying to minimise the impact on staff's lives and the livelihoods as much as possible. And although our predictions although the costs are significant, and the difference between the costs and the subsidy provided by the government on housing and homelessness is significant, it's not as significant as we thought it was going to be. So that's why we've got this difference. And we've also, at the time when we predicted 10 million and 4 million, we didn't have the details of both the income compensation scheme, which I think I've already highlighted is bringing us benefit but not bringing us enough benefit, and a number of other details. So then the final part of this paper looks forward into next year, and it is still looking really quite bleak. So I know cabinet members get bored with me saying this same thing over and over again, but essentially, well, maybe you don't. And maybe you're also, delighted that I'm such a terrible broken record. I can see by the look on your faces that you're so delighted I'm a broken record about this. But essentially, next year, this year looks tough, and the only way to break even this year, which of course we're legally obliged to, will be to use reserves. But the following year and the years after still look significantly challenging. And we have to think that this council really is a 13 million turnover. That's really, really tiny in the big scheme of things. And therefore being, 2.4 million adrift, which is what we look like we will be into next financial year, represents a significant proportion of our overall net expenditure. So our plan is to try to minimise the impact on staff and let our capital and assets do some of the hard work on our behalf. And that will include rationalising use of space, better use of our assets, increasing our automation and digitisation of our service offer, and thinking of how we make efficiencies in our service delivery, at the same time as trying to absolutely make sure that we keep delivering the essential services that are needed. And I do struggle still to see how that works without understanding the details of the recent Chancellor's spending review. So we know that the government have planned to improve the offer to local authorities. We have yet to see the detail, and therefore I can't at this stage give Cabinet members assurance that we will be in clear water or some other metaphor like that. Over to you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Nicholson. So I'd just like to invite Councillor Borman to let us know if there's any feedback from the Policy and Performance Advisory Committee on that report, please.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Liz Borman, the committee support the recommendations in full to this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Borman. So can I open up to Cabinet members just to see if anybody has anything they'd like to input on that particular report? No. So obviously I'd just add to what Councillor Nicholson said very briefly around the difficulty of forward planning at the moment. I think, you know, when we talk about the very valid point about the that Councillor Borman's raised about the sort of differences in levels of predicted shortfall, it has to be pointed out at the same time that we're seeing an unprecedented situation where the government are refusing to, well, not refusing to, but choosing not to give councils any certainty beyond a relatively short time frame. And indeed, we had another one-year funding settlement talked about this year, which nationally, estimated by the LGA, still leaves a massive funding gap for councils. And of course, we've seen councils other than ours have to declare effectively that they are looking at bankruptcy. Obviously, we're in a better position than that, and that is obviously tribute to our officers and also to you know, sound financial management from previous administrations going back for a long time. So it's not a question of party politics. It's a question of the hard reality of the way that council finances work, and local government finances are very constrained. And we see ourselves in a position where, as Councillor Nicholson alluded to, you know, councils have been encouraged to try to find ways to generate more income as the government wished to cut back on grants. But now we're seeing a situation where that commercial, that push towards more commercial income is now being actively discouraged and seen as something that councils have over-committed to at the time when COVID-19 is clearly having a massive impact, particularly those councils that had invested in, for instance, the areas of hospitality and tourism, which have been particularly affected by COVID-19. So I think it's a difficult situation, but I think it's really worth pointing out that, you know, we're in a position, as a lot of councils are facing a lot of challenges and really needing the government to take quite a long-term approach to this as we look at the comprehensive spending review next year. And I hope that the Chancellor will be doing that. So can I commend the recommendation to Cabinet members? It's just to note the report. Is everybody happy to just note this report and we'll move on? Fantastic. Thank you very much, everybody. The next item you're pleased to hear is Councillor Nicholson's last one for now. It is the council tax base and non-domestic rates income for 21-22. Councillor Nicholson, over to you.
Councillor Zoe Nicholson, thank you. This is the last paper. I'll be really brief on this. This is a technical paper that we're obliged to produce for Cabinet ahead of full council in February. I suppose a few things just to note. That the impact of COVID-19 on our community, we have played into, you can see are playing into the council tax base. So collection rates are down by 1%. Council tax base rate is down by 0.66%. And then which makes the overall, and the reason why that matters is because that's the income, as James has just said, that's the income that we are largely solely reliant on for the delivery of essential services, like people's bins, like supporting our homeless population and those people who are in housing need, like providing essential planning services. The only other thing that I would note is that it's not possible to set our business rates because they are actually set by government nationally, and we've still not heard, just to talk to the detail, the uncertainty that Councillor McCreary just talked about. We haven't heard what the detail is on our business rates, and We don't yet understand what the impact, because we haven't been provided the details by the government on what next year's business rates and pooling arrangements may or may not be for this authority. And that matters because that's also key to us understanding how much income we will have to provide essential services. So I don't know if our Chief Finance Officer has anything to add on that more technical report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholson. Can I invite our Chief Financial Officer to add anything that she has to add to that particular report?
Good afternoon. I'm Hamira Jawadi, Council's Chief Finance Officer. Nothing further to add from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Hamira. Could I just ask, invite Councillors Borman or Livingston, if you have anything to input, could you just raise your hand, let me know if you've got anything you want to add to that report? No? Wonderful. Thank you very much. And I'll open it up to Cabinet members. Do any Cabinet members wish to speak on the item? Okay, good. All right, lovely. In that case, I will recommend to you the three recommendations from officers. As Councillor Nicholson said, this is a required thing for us to do. We do every year. And can I just propose that to you all, and is everybody happy to agree the recommendations as laid out in the report?
Yes. Agreed, Chair.
Thanks all. Okay, we're up to 3:30 as promised. We're about halfway through the agenda at the moment. Can I ask Cabinet members if they would like to take a short break at this point, given we have quite a lot to get through, or whether they'd like to power through and try and get to the end? Just let me know what you think.
5-minute break, please, Chair.
Yep. All right then, let's take a 5-minute break. Simon, can we just pause for 5 minutes then, and then we'll resume. It's currently 3:27 by my clock, so we'll resume at 3:32, if that's okay with everybody. Okay, I made that 30 seconds, so let's resume the meeting. Can I just remind everybody to mute themselves when they're not speaking, just to avoid any background noise. Thank you to any members of the public who've borne with us. We'll just had a quick break to get cups of tea and use the facilities. We'll just resume the agenda where we were up to, which was that we were just about to move on to item 12, which is portfolio progress and performance report for Q2. Councillor Collier, could I invite you to introduce this item, please?
Thank you, Chair. So you will all have noticed that the report has slightly changed format. I'd like to thank Millie McDevitt, the Head of Performance, for the work she's done with her team to change the report. You'll now notice that it's broken down into key performance indicators and then performance indicators. So if it's okay with you, Chair, did we want to run through as we normally would, and maybe if Councillor Borman or Lidington wanted to pick up on something as we went through, they maybe raise their hand, if that was okay with Councillor Borman or Lidington?
Yes, I think that would be, let's just do it like that. So Councillors Borman and Lidington, just raise your hands if you want to raise any specific points as we go through, and obviously all Cabinet members do the same thing too. So just stick your hand up and I'll keep an eye on the list there. So far away, Councillor Collier.
Okay, so on page 54 and 55 of the papers, we've got the key performance indicators. Number 1 and number 2 are on, the short trend for those is on target, which is to maximise the collection of both council tax and business rates. However, I just wanted to mention those because they don't tell entirely the full story. However, we have just had entirely the full story from Councillor Nicholson. So we'll probably leave that at that. But so the short trend doesn't give you the full story. The trend is up. However, the collection rate is as we've just discussed. There's nothing further on 54 or 55 that's red. So we would move to 56 and 57, which are the performance indicators. Number 12 is
Chris.
Housing.
Yeah, can you hear me, Chris?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's mine. Tim, you there, Tim? I think you are. Sorry, I think you're on there. Look, I mean, I think this is unfortunate insofar as it is red, but the commentary is very good. I think it does give the mitigating sort of circumstances which are a cause of this concern. Tim?
Yes, Councillor.
Hello, Tim. Tim, you and I have talked about, delivery on this particular item. I think we've pretty much touched on this most weeks. Do you want to just explain a little bit more? Because anyone listening who's not effectively a fellow Cabinet member, I don't know Cabinet members are aware of the situation. I'm very keen for you and for officers to explain that actually, although this is rather a sort of a red I wouldn't have wanted, I genuinely believe that things are not only improving, but there are good reasons for why this performance occurred on this quarter.
Thank you, Councillor. Tim Whelan, Director of Service Delivery. Yes, this performance indicator relates to how quickly we turn around void properties, something that's really important when we've got the housing list such as we have. And you'll see that the previous quarter value was really good. This is quite simply due to, at the start of the first lockdown, March 23rd, repairs was considered as non-essential. So our contractor was unable to carry out any repairs for up to the last few weeks of Q2. So the lack of repairs has really slewed the figures. It's simply just an impact of COVID. Things, as Councillor Mayor has indicated, we talk about this weekly, they have picked up now, although there are still some issues with some suppliers of things such as plasterboard and kitchen units. That's a national problem, but that we're back on track now with our repairs.
And we expect to have an improved performance. I mean, I think if it's not improved on the next quarter, I think it's reasonable for you to ask some, or for anyone to ask some more searching questions. But as far as we know at the moment, we expect to have a more positive response for you all when we report next time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Meyer. Sorry, Chris. I just saw Councillor Denise' hand is up as well.
Thank you. I was just trying to catch your eye. I think when we're on page 54 and item 5, that actually we've got this is about how quickly we answer the phones and deal with customer response. And I'd just like to highlight yet again that we've got another amazing increase in the in how effectively we're answering the phones. We despite lockdown, despite everything we've just been through, we're still exceeding time on time how well we're doing. I'd just like to congratulate the staff and the teams that are involved in this, because they've done a sterling effort to really support our members of the public in getting the services they need and want. So I just wanted that noted, because I really value it, and I think it really needs shouting from the hilltops. Thank you ever so much, teams.
Thank you, Councillor Denis. I can't see any other hands, so Councillor Collier, do you want to continue?
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Denis. More than welcome to add that. That's it seems to be becoming a regular theme. So moving back over to page 57 is the next red, which is a planning KPI. Emily, Councillor O'Brien, did you want to comment on that?
Yes, I'm Councillor O'Brien. To you, Chris. Yes, thank you for inviting me in on that. So just to say about this red indicator, it is a slightly funny one always. So the indicator that's marking red is the percentage of appeals where we've made a decision as a planning authority, whether that's the committee or our officers, and then there's been an appeal and the government inspector has overturned our local decision. So I think that in terms of how I feel about that indicator, I do think it fits it's a government set indicator. And for me, it doesn't always represent the quality of our local decision making, because I think some of those appeals which the government overturns aren't necessarily what we as a local planning authority and what our local residents, our accountable local committee members have chosen. So I do have a bit of a health warning around the indicator itself. The other reason why it's a little bit tricky, that one, is because it's a very low number of appeals. So sometimes, it's just kind of, you've got 100% because one happened. So it skews the figures. Having said that, we've had a really helpful suggestion from the Policy and Performance Advisory Committee about looking at how we present it, because it's obviously not working terribly well at the moment. So they've very helpfully suggested that we consider aligning how we present that figure against the way the national government presents it. So that means that the government have a kind of 2-year rolling average on that figure. And what that means is that the data that you present, if we go just with their version of it, is a little bit behind. So we'll have a bit of a lag on it. But it does mean it tallies completely with what the government is saying. And there's also been a recommendation, it's not a formal recommendation, but the discussion that was held has recommended splitting it into 2. So there's a difference between the major and the non-major applications, which makes complete sense. So we're looking at doing that and bringing that back in future. In the meantime, obviously, it is hard to judge with appeals. It's very hard there's an element of not being able to predict when something will go to appeal and be overturned, but we always try and gain any learning that we can do. So in this particular case, there's a mix of officer and planning committee appeals that were overturned, and we've taken the learning from that. And in case of the committee, it's always fed back to the committee in a formal report when something, when a decision they've made has then been overturned at appeal, they get to do the learning from that. So I think that's a continuous process. And I would just add as well that it was good to see, given that we've had, the difficulties staff have had working from home during lockdown, trying to run our kind of quite complex systems from their bedrooms. It's good to see that there's actually been an improvement in other areas of performance in planning. And I'd like to thank officers for the work they've done. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Brien. Just moving on from the planning, there are no further reds, but I do want to touch on something in my own portfolio. Right at the end, number 23 is a KPI that we've struggled with for a long time. However, some really amazing work has been done around actual flexible working. Now, you hear flexible working spoken about And it often is actually flexible working that's based on being flexible for the employer. But this is flexible working that is flexible for the employee. The impact of that has been that for the second quarter running, we've met our targets for sickness. And I think that's an incredibly positive move. And I think that the work that Helen's done there is really fantastic work. And I think it really speaks well of our HR department. So thank you to that. And that is the end of the report, unless there are any other questions.
Any other questions? Your hands up? No? Okay. Thank you very much, Councillor Collier, and just to commend that the Cabinet notes that report, and we'll move on to the next item unless there's any dissent from that. Lovely. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Councillor Collier. So item 14 is recommendations from the Community Infrastructure Levy on Community Infrastructure Levy spending. Councillor O'Brien, would you be able to introduce this item for us, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So there's a recommendation here. We're asking Cabinet to approve the release of the Community Infrastructure Levy funds for this year. So I was just going to explain what Community Infrastructure Levy is for anyone who's watching or taking part who doesn't know. We know that development has an impact on an area where it takes place. So when we have new people or new businesses coming in, new development, that creates extra demand on our services, on our schools, on our transport. And the Community Infrastructure Levy is a really powerful thing for us as a planning authority because it allows us to get something back for our residents. So it directly funds infrastructure that occurs as a result of development. Obviously, we have a process for giving out that money. There's large sums involved, as you can see, which is fantastic because it means we can bring huge benefits to our area. So we have an open process. We get expressions of interest coming in July, and in this year they came in July and August. The timescales do rotate. We open the funding pots at different times. So we put out a call, people who are interested in applying, organisations that were interested in applying, and importantly that we're able to apply, because clearly it's only for certain types of funding, for infrastructure funding. They're all assessed through a transparent process. So those bids go into our officer who makes recommendations. Those recommendations then go off to the Community Infrastructure Levy Management Board. And what's really important about that board is that that it's a cross-party board, and also it has representation from right across the district on it. So councillors come from all political parties, but there's also a spread of north and south and middle. Less so the middle, because we mainly cover the north and south of the district, because obviously the National Park is the planning authority and has the Community Infrastructure Levy in the middle. So the recommendations from the Community Infrastructure Management Board, and then some specific recommendations around the strategic spend, go to the Executive Board. That's again a cross-party board. It's myself and Councillor Denis as the relevant portfolio holders, plus Councillor Miller as the Chair of Scrutiny. And in this case, the report from those also went to the Policy and Performance Advisory Committee as well. So there's a whole process around agreeing this spend, which is important because actually this has been a really good year for our Community Infrastructure Levy spending. Last year we did undertake a review of the process, making sure that the climate emergency was built in and that the process is the very best possible for our residents. And that has been really successful. So for the first time, we've been oversubscribed with really great bids for money. I think the only bad side of that is that some of those bids can't be funded. But anyone unsuccessful has had feedback to inform their future applications. And I'm also really pleased that there's been a really good spread of different types of projects in different areas of the district. And I think, as we've touched on earlier in some of the papers around community wealth building, about how important local jobs are in our local area, it's really important that that money is being spent in our district at this time, which is so difficult for our residents. So yeah, it's exciting to be here and asking Cabinet to release the funding for these. There are a couple I was going to draw attention to. It's great to see schools being funded. So there's a new form of entry at Sea Haven Academy in New Haven. I'm drawing attention to that because that's actually going on a number of years. It's been a gradual release of the funds for that, and this is the final year. So now there has now been a full new form of entry added to that school, which is great. We've also seen some great applications for village halls. So Wivelsfield Village Hall, I wanted to mention, Ringmer Village Hall as well in my own ward. Good to see building improvements there. Really great to see improvements to local fire stations in both Barkham and Seaford, and also some great stuff in Peacehaven, so pedestrian access, wildflower planting. So in summary, I would ask you to release the funds and say how pleased we are to be able to support our residents as a result of development in the district, and in a sense to ensure that they're getting the benefits of development. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Brien. Before I open up to Cabinet members, I can see your hands up there, Councillor O'Keefe. I will just quickly go to Councillor Borman just to see if there were any comments from the Policy and Performance Committee this report went to.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Liz Borman. There's lots of discussion at the meeting with regarding to funding outside our district, and also whether we will be applying for funding from other districts for our district. Also, when there's recommendations from the management and executive boards to Cabinet, that they're actually made in a recommendation on the report, because one previously wasn't picked up on. But apart from that, we're very happy with all the funding that's being given out to the local towns and villages, and fully support the recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Borman. Can I then ask Cabinet members, start with Councillor O'Keefe, if that's okay? She had her hand up for a little while.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ruth O'Keefe. Yeah, it's great, Emily, to hear such a transparent description of how it all happens. And speaking as someone whose ward and division are in Lewes, so therefore in the SCMPA, I only wish that they were listening so that they could do the same sorts of things. It's quite obscure replying to them, and I've been waiting, I think, for now 13 months for news about something. So I'm really glad to hear how transparent and properly it's all running along.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. Councillor Dinny.
Thank you, Councillor Johnny Denny. I'd just like to say I really welcome the broad range of projects that have come forward this time, and particularly the geographical spread as well. It's it's really changed from last year when we were considering these. It's really definitely there's a higher level, a higher quality bid. There's a greater spread. There's much more. There's just so much more to it, and I'm really really pleased that we're funding so many things across or able to fund with this developer money, so many things across the district. So well, I welcome it. So it's really good to see. Thank you. I'm pleased that these have got this far.
Thank you, Councillor Denny. Just before I come back to you, Councillor O'Brien, I personally just add that obviously as relevant to my portfolio, the funding for the sidings, or railway keys, it's sometimes known, in New Haven is a particularly important injection of funding. That's a strategically very important project that we're looking to deliver in the spring of next year, around Easter, that will bring a sustainability hub, active travel sustainability hub to New Haven, and also Riverside Cafe and various other bits and pieces. So it's quite an exciting project, and it's really brilliant to see the SIL funding building on the money that we got from the Towns Board, the advanced funding we got from the Towns Board to kick off that project. So it's a really great to see that investment there, and I'm really pleased that council colleagues supported that. So if I just come back to you, Councillor O'Brien, to sum up, and then we'll move to the recommendation.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm Councillor O'Brien. I just wanted to respond to Councillor Borman's point about some of the funding going outside the district. So obviously we follow a process, and any infrastructure provider is entitled to apply for that, and that's completely normal. And this is common to SIL processes all up and down the country, really. I suppose the thing with development is it doesn't necessarily recognise district boundaries. And particularly in the north of the district, we've had a number of developments, including there's two developments that together were nearly 200 houses, right on the border with Mid Sussex. So it's entirely appropriate for authorities to apply from outside the district within the current process. But if you do have any concerns, you or any of the councillors here have any concerns, we are going to be reviewing SIL again next year, particularly the more strategic side of the spend, to make sure we are being properly strategic about it. So we would really welcome if you have any thoughts on that, to feed them into, you can either feed them into officers. We have Emma, I think, here, who's really led on this process, and I'd like to thank her. She's put an awful lot of work into ensuring a really rigorous application process. So you're welcome to feed them in directly to Emma or through any of the 3 members of the SIL Executive Board as well, myself, Councillor Denis, Councillor Miller, if you would prefer. And then we would absolutely take those into account in terms of any learning that we could have for next year. I would say as well, if we did get suddenly a massive application, you know, if somebody's putting 300 houses right on the edge of one of our settlements, say, or one of, you know, near to, I mean, it's not really going to happen, but let's say, you know, in Seaford, right on, you know, 300 houses just outside the district, but would all rely on Seaford services, we would absolutely expect that the SIL that we would then consider applying into SIL in exchange, and that is normal. That happens all up and down the country. SIL is based on needs as a result of development, not on boundary lines. But do as I say, feed in your thoughts on that into the process so that we can take them into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Brien. In that case, can I ask for Cabinet's approval to release the SIL funds as recommended by the Board and the Executive Committee, please? Thank you. Any dissent from that? No, wonderful. Thank you very much, Cabinet. Just moving on to the next item then, is in my name. Very exciting project it is too, the New Haven Towns Fund, which is, I'll just run through this very briefly, just for the benefit of people watching who might not be familiar. I'm sure all councillors are familiar with what this is. It is a government fund that the District Council is playing a leading role in putting together a bid for. We have convened a board, which is chaired by a local business person. That is putting together a bid to the Towns Fund, which could yield up to £25 million for to support the council's aims to regenerate New Haven. We're quite advanced with that now, and we've gone through a consultation process on the bids themes, and we have a list of specific projects. Council officers are working extremely hard on this. We have quite a small regeneration team who are having to put together what is actually a very large bid, and there's an enormous amount of feasibility work that goes into this, and assessment of the various projects. And obviously, as you might imagine, quite a lot of people have different ideas about things that could be done, but obviously there's only so much that you can achieve with 25 million, which might sound like a lot of money, but if you take into account that the currently unused port access road costs £23 million on its own, it gives you an idea that £25 million doesn't necessarily stretch that far when you start looking at major infrastructure. And obviously New Haven is in need of significant investment over a long period of time. However, the report outlines where we've got up to so far. I would say that it has been the board itself, and I just mentioned this because I think it's important. The board itself is constituted of actually a very wide range of people. It's been quite an interesting group. It involves political stakeholders, but also people from business, people from the education sector, people from voluntary sector. There's different people from different backgrounds. It's been really interesting to get everybody's input into this process and how we might look to use the funds to regenerate New Haven. Just for context for anybody in New Haven who may have taken part in the consultation, obviously there was some frustration that we couldn't include certain things in there, one of which was road spending. We can't do anything to the ring road, I'm afraid, with this money, and it's really important to point that out. This is the criteria that's been laid down by government as to how this money can be spent. It's to be spent on other things, so that's why the ring road, which clearly is one of the biggest restricting factors in New Haven's growth, is not actually included in the fund. But there are a lot of other really exciting things in there, and we'll be looking forward to producing the report for submission in January, which means that hopefully we'll be hearing sometime early next year on whether we've been successful in our bid. as a corollary to that, obviously some time ago we submitted, under the previous administration, we submitted a bid to the Future High Streets Fund for Newhaven as well, which is additional to this. And we are still awaiting a response on that, but we're hoping to hear very soon on whether that's been successful. I mention it purely because these two things interact quite closely. If we're given all of the Future High Streets Fund money, then that doesn't really affect the Towns Fund. But of course, if we're not given all the Future High Streets Fund money, that will have some knock-on effect onto the Towns Fund. So hopefully we'll hear about that very soon, and obviously we'll be relaying that to residents as soon as we know anything about it. I would invite very quickly Ian Fitzpatrick, our Director of Regeneration, to see if he wanted to add anything briefly to that.
Hello there, it's Ian Fitzpatrick, Deputy Chief Executive. I think, James, you've pretty much covered most of it. I think the board process has been very helpful to get us to a point where there's an understanding of the criteria, because the fund, as you say, has quite significant criteria. We do have to show to government how that will benefit jobs, things like that, economic development. So I think we have a good sort of basis for that bid, and obviously this report seeks approval to move to the next stage to submit that bid.
Thank you, Ian. So I just ask whether Councillor Borman or Councillor Linnington would like to add anything at this point. Please raise your hand if you'd like to. Councillor Borman.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Councillor Liz Borman. It's just really good to see how this Towns Board and the residents' survey is so positive to feed into the deal that is the bid going through, and hopefully we'll get it and it'll be a really good positive investment for Newhaven. Thank you, Chair.
Absolutely. Thank you, Councillor Borman. Would anybody open it to Cabinet members? Would any Cabinet members like to input on this or have any comments to make on the paper? Councillor O'Brien.
I mean, I think just as others have said, just to really welcome this opportunity. You know, people in Newhaven have been waiting a really long time for regeneration, and it's really good to see some opportunities in front. You know, what's happening already is exciting, and it's good that there's more possibilities, more opportunities. So just to really welcome that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Brien. Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to also, Councillor Julie Carr, Newhaven Councillor. I just really wanted to welcome this as a Newhaven councillor and resident. It's been a long time coming, and Newhaven is sorely in need of a lot of investment. And yes, I think hopefully this will deliver. So fingers crossed. I think there's some very exciting opportunities there in both the Future High Street Fund, but also the town deal as well. So I absolutely welcome this and much needed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Carr. Any other comments or questions? In that case, before I just move to the recommendations, just very quickly say as well, it does say in the paper, but just as an idea of kind of what officers are competing with here, this is a £25 million bid with, I think, is around 30 projects in it that all need feasibility, background, and to need to be in line with significant government criteria. They're looking to submit this bid on the 29th of January. So there's an awful lot to do with Christmas and New Year in the middle of that. So, you know, it's an enormous job. We're obviously asking of Ian Fitzpatrick and the entire regeneration team led by Peter Sharp, and they're doing an enormous amount of work on this. So it's really exciting, but also an awful lot to ask. So I'd like to commend the recommendations to you all. Are you happy to accept the recommendations as laid out in the report? Would anybody like to dissent from that? No? Okay, thank you, councillors. That's approved. Let's move on to the next item. Item 16 is a memorandum of understanding between the Environment Agency and Lewes District Council relating to coastal risk management at Telscombe Cliffs. I believe both Councillors Bird and O'Brien are going to introduce this, and I will go to Councillor Bird to start us off.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Matthew Bird. This is a very important paper to bring at this time, and I just want to sort of put my thanks to, in particular, Officers Tim Bartlett and Tim Whelan, Director of Service because what they've done with this paper and brokering this this MOU is to kind of give us a sort of clear approach going forward on tackling coastal protection issues in this particular area. So the memorandum of understanding sort of sets out an understanding between ourselves and the Environment Agency, and ensures that we're in the strongest possible position to manage these risks, particularly in this particular area between Portobello and Lincoln Avenue South along Telscombe Esplanade. So this memorandum will ensure that we have access to best resources available, so in terms of technical resources and capacity, but also that it puts us in a very good position to apply for funding. So there's obviously a lot of money that will be needed for protection in this area. So, and that's to protect residential and non-residential properties, as well as, obviously there's key assets along that route, including the A259. So it's a really, really important piece of work. And I think just to put it in a wider context, I mean, what I can say as a climate professional in my day job is that, we are going to have to make significant adaptations to ensure that we are resilient to a changing climate. So, this is an important part of that. And I think we've made it very clear in our climate emergency motion last year that we will do all we can to ensure that in those actions, we are open and transparent with our residents, and that we facilitate clear, open channels of communication. So, we've already started to do that on, for instance, on the New Haven Flood Alleviation Scheme and through previous projects around Coastal Communities 2150. So I'm going to pass over to Councillor O'Brien to say something further, and then hopefully Tim will come in as well.
Thank you, Matthew. I have very little to add to that thorough introduction. I think just to really, really welcome this report, and as Matthew has said, to thank our officers. Tim Bartlett in particular has put a huge amount of work into this. All I would say is this is such a good news story for our residents. We have a problem, which is that houses, businesses and a stretch of the A259 are threatened by coastal erosion. We don't want them to fall in the sea. This is setting out a possible way forward with some real, with the right people leading on that. So absolutely welcome the Environment Agency agreeing to take a lead on that and work in partnership with ourselves and others to do everything we can to work against that risk, to prevent that damage. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Brien, and to Councillor Bird for that excellent introduction. Councillor Borman, oh sorry, I think we were going to ask Tim Whelan to come in first actually, to comment on that.
Thank you, Chair. Tim Whelan, Director of Service Delivery. There's not much to add from those two excellent explanations of the paper, but just to say we're really pleased as a team that we've got to this point, that we are able to enter into this memorandum of understanding and work together with the Environment Agency on dealing with the issues that are posed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And Councillor Borman, is there anything to add from the Policy and Performance Advisory Committee?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Liz Borman. No, it's very positive response, and we're all very happy to be working with the Environment Agency, who are experts in this field. So we fully support the recommendations in this report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Borman. I'd open it up to Cabinet members. Does anybody wish to speak on this item? Councillor Collier.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, as a Peacehaven councillor, I share the same bit of coast, and I'm obviously talking to residents and local groups frequently. This has been an issue that's gone on for a long time. I just wanted to touch on, though, why it's so important. It's because of the scale of the project. I mean, recently we've been carrying out work to repair the groins in Peacehaven to protect the sea defences there. We've done some work on the Bastion steps to make them safe. Those kinds of works we can do as a district council. The scale of this project is far too big for us to do alone, and that's why this is so important. And just to echo Councillor Bird's words about Tim Bartlett, to get this project to this point is just a fantastic piece of work, and I think this is incredibly positive for the residents of East Saltdean and Telscombe. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Collier. Anybody else wish to speak on this item? No, in that case, unless Councillor Bird or O'Brien wish to add anything else? No. Okay, in that case, let's move to the recommendations. I just commend the recommendations to Cabinet. Does everyone agree with the recommendations laid out in the paper? Yep. Does anyone dissent from those recommendations? I can assume your hand there, Councillor Collier, is a legacy hand from previous. Great, thank you, colleagues. That's approved. Just to move on to the next item then, which is back to the North Street Quarter, which is where we started, and we're going to talk about scheme delivery. I'm going to ask Councillor Nicholson, who's had a nice rest after taking us through the beginning of the meeting, to come back and introduce this item on the North Street Quarter for us. Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Councillor Zoe Nicholson. Cabinet and any members of the public who've joined us later, there may be, we'll just recap a little bit. So Cabinet will remember that in the summer, North Street Quarter Limited went out for procurement for the whole site. We are, of course, a minority landowner, and very recently, as in the last I think effectively in the last 2 weeks, we now understand that North Street Quarter Limited do not wish to appoint a preferred developer, but they now wish to sell their share of the land to Human Nature. What we're being asked to consider today is a bit of a landmark, really, after 20 years of various planning applications. I believe there may have been 3+ planning applications, at least multiple owners. And as I spoke earlier, this marks the 20th anniversary. This year marks the 20th anniversary of the serious flooding in Lewes that caused so much devastation. What we're being asked to do today is to agree to a set of heads of terms that enable us to fulfil the National Parks planning policy for the whole site, which is that the whole site is developed, and therefore we'll be agreeing to, I hope that you'll be agreeing during the discussion to the heads of terms for the proposed sale of our small share of this land and site, so that the whole site can be developed, and the whole site will then bring the much needed flood defences. And I suppose it is worth making just a tiny point, because I think Officer Tim Bartlett has had much praise today, but one of the reasons why this town has remained protected is broadly to do with the work that he's done both upstream and downstream over the last 20 years with partners to make sure that Lewes as a town is safe. And yet the key part that's missing is the flood defences in the North Street Quarter, which without those, we still remain at significant risk. So we will, agreeing to these heads of terms, will bring about, I guess, one way of thinking about it is that, I would like to say it's the final chapter. However, we know that Human Nature require a new planning application. So I would like to say it's like the third book in a trilogy, and hopefully within that we'll be opening the first chapter of that book by agreeing to these heads of terms that enable both the flood defences, a health hub for our practices in Lewes, and also much needed sustainable and affordable homes. I just also want to note, Chair, that because the heads of terms commercially sensitive. It's really important that we get cross-party discussion on this. I would like us also to, perhaps after a short bit of discussion here, move to the pink papers and the exclusion of the public for that discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholson. I think that's a very good suggestion. Can I just invite Councillor Borman to give us any comments from the Policy and Performance Advisory Committee, please?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Liz Borman. We had some discussion on this. We feel sad that it's going back to planning and it's going to be a longer time now before there is any development, but we're quite happy that this development is still in the process of housing being done for the area, and fully support the recommendations in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Borman. And I'll open up to Cabinet members for an initial discussion before we have a look at the exempt papers. Councillor Meyer.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just say that I think that this is I think I agree fully with what Councillor Nicholson has just said. This is a landmark opportunity, really. Now, there's been a lot of landmark opportunities with North Street Quarter. We're aware of that. But we need to contextualise this. There is going to have to be a new planning application, and this is, of course, going to have to be handled by the South Downs National Park Authority. But the good news here, I think, is that we all know that land in Lewes is extraordinarily difficult to come by for any significant additional and much-needed homes. And I think there is wide cross-party agreement on that. The opportunity that this offers, both in terms of sustainability on the one hand and flood defences on the other, combined with the South Downs National Park's extremely ambitious aims on affordable housing components in any large-scale application, and by any measure, by the way, this is going to be now an even larger application, does give us, as a council, working in partnership with the park and with other partners, it does give us the opportunity to bring forward more affordable homes. And really, I think that the delay is disconcerting. I think what Councillor Borman has just said is true. It is a shame that in some respects it feels sometimes like a Tolkien novel, doesn't it? Really, talking about chapters. When are we going to get to the promised land? I just genuinely feel that we need to stick with this now. We need to commend officers who've worked tirelessly behind the scenes to bring us to this point. And I think we need, as a council, and by that I mean all of us as councillors, regardless of our party allegiance, we need to get behind this and do the very best we can to deliver the very best arrangements, housing, flood defences, sustainability, health hubs, for the good citizens of Lewes. I mean, they've been waiting a long time, and Zoe Nicholson is absolutely right. I too remember the floods 20 years ago. They were devastating, and I had a number of friends who were affected. So anything we can do now to support this is to be commended, and I support totally this this memorandum. As the representative on the South Downs National Park Authority, I also wholly support it, and I know the park will do their level best to give us the best possible outcome here if we work in partnership, which I know we will, with the park. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Meyer. I think it was Councillor Denis next.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Johnny Denis. I just wanted to give a tiny bit of colour to the past. Just prior to the floods 20 years ago, just a couple of 2 or 3 months prior to the big floods in Lewes, I had been a resident of Corporation Villas right against the river in Lewes, in the middle of this site. In the few months before the floods, I'd moved out, but I returned during the floods to see the house that I'd shortly left behind to be 2 floors underwater. And it's such a shocking moment to see half of the town that you know and you are part of be underwater and affected so badly, your home affected so badly, that one half of the town is distressed, the other half grieving for and not knowing how to cope and manage for the half that's been directly affected. There's the indirect impacts. I see that this proposal that's now coming towards us now is going to be an opportunity to right that by building these flood defences that we've needed for the last 20 years, for a flood risk that is increasing year on year as climate change develops. That we're going to be seeing a flood risk going from 100-year opportunities to 100-year risk to 50-year to 20 years, but we've got to do something about it. And like this is finally gets the pieces together of that puzzle where we can have a consolidated approach to this stretch of the river being protected, the town being protected from this stretch of the river. So I really welcome this, and I just hope that they can pull it off, and that would be a real success.
Thank you, Councillor Denis. Councillor Bird.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Matthew Bird. As we're sort of telling flood stories, I thought I would add mine. 20 years ago today, I remember starting work about a week before the floods in North Street, and it feels like man and boy in some way or other. I've been involved in North Street, and actually been sort of closely involved with some of the frankly shonky things that have come forward in the intervening time. I remember at the outset there was a lot of emphasis on sustainability, and that was eroded in some of the proposals that came forward. But today, I think is a good day. It feels like a good day if we agree this, because I think there's a lot of sustainability in the DNA of the development that we're talking about, and and flood defences. As we've spoken around coastal erosion. Increasing intensity, more flood events. We really can't agree this soon enough. So it's a good day.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bird. Councillor O'Brien, you put your hand up.
Just to add quickly, I'm Councillor O'Brien. Just to add quickly to the points made, which I agree with. I absolutely welcome this scheme. We've talked quite a lot about the benefits that will come about as a result through flooding, affordable, and the things that we can generate through the planning system and through requirements we put on it. But I'm actually really excited about the scheme itself. I think if we look at the track record of the developers who will be leading this scheme, they've got a very strong track record for really exciting development with residents at the centre. So I completely hear what Councillor Ballman and others have said about the delay, and I know everyone's waited so long. It is sad that there is an additional delay. However, I do think that in the end we will end up with a better scheme. So I'd just like to welcome that. Just quickly from a planning perspective as well, because this has come up a couple of times. Just to obviously for this time round, it will be the South Downs National Park Authority who are the planning authority. But we will also have a role as a district council. So as Councillor Myers said, we'll be working constructively with the National Park to ensure it's delivering the best scheme. But we're also going to be a consultee on that scheme. So where necessary, we'll also be a critical friend and really stand up to make sure that our residents get the best possible outcome from this development. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Brien. And I think all of these points are very well made. I mean, it's clearly really exciting. Some of you know that I was, before I was fortunate enough to live in Newhaven, I lived in Lewes for quite a while and represented part of Lewes on the district council, in fact, when I lived there. And this was always something that was rumbling along in the background. There were a lot of false starts on this, and I think that the flood defences point is well made. I mean, certainly in Newhaven, our flood defences that were put in a few years ago are still being worked on now. They're still being built. These things take time to do, and they are much needed. The flood defence in Newhaven are used pretty frequently, and the water is often up the walls of the flood defences. So, it's already it's already necessary in Newhaven, and they only built a few years ago. So, I think to Councillor Denis' point about the increasing frequency of these flood incidents and the obviously the massive impact of climate change, we have to be aware of that. But I also think that the community benefit here is enormous. That site has been in a state of uncertainty, which affects the entire town really, in as much as it's such a visible site, particularly from the other side of the river, around Tesco and Morling Wreck. It's a very visible site, and it's often asked, what is happening with that? Why is it being left there? And I think there's been a lot of frustration over the years about why that hasn't been able to be progressed. And clearly, as a council, I think through successive administrations, there's been a real effort to get this going, but I think we should be really proud as an administration that we have actually got this into a stage where it looks like it might come to fruition very quickly. So it's exciting times. Just to address the point that Councillor Nicholson made in her introduction about the exempt papers, we have, I think it would be good for us to have a discussion of the exempt papers, which means that we need to go into a private session. We'll do that. I'll propose that to Cabinet now. That'll mean that we'll have to turn off the live feed and exclude members of the public temporarily just while we discuss that, because it's a confidential item. But we will resume the feed afterwards. So for any of you watching live, if you hang around, we will be back, fear not. And I'll just propose that kind of formally. Can I now ask Cabinet members to resolve that we move into private session in accordance with our agenda front sheet in order to consider item 19, North Street Quarter Scheme Delivery Exempt Appendix 1, prior to our decision on the open report. So as I just said, we will come back and make that decision in public. For members of the public watching on the live stream, the open part of the meeting will resume following the discussion of the exempt item. So can I put that to Cabinet for agreement, please?
Agreed, Chair.
Is there any dissent?
Agreed.
Any dissent? No. Thank you, Cabinet members. In that case, can I ask the Head of Democratic Services to move us into a closed session, please? Okay, I think we're back in public session now. Thanks to any of you who showed the fortitude to stick with us through that short hiatus there, where we just discussed the exempt paper. So we're still on the same item we were before we left. We haven't reached the decision point on it yet. I'll just invite, before we move to the recommendations, just a final invitation to any cabinet members or members of the opposition present, if they'd like to raise any last points before we move to the recommendations as put forward in the public papers. Wonderful. Okay, thank you very much, everybody, for the discussion. And I'd like to commend the recommendations as laid out in the papers. Is everybody happy to accept the recommendations?
Yes, Chair.
Agreed, Chair.
Yeah.
And is there any dissent? No. Thank you very much to all colleagues for that. And that brings us to the end of the agenda for today. It's quite a long one, so thanks for hanging in there, everyone. And if any of you watching at home watch the entire meeting, then please let us know, and we might be able to send you some sort of award, because that was a pretty long one, but well done if you stuck with us all the way through it. So I'll bring the meeting to an end. It concludes the items of business, and I'm concluding this meeting at 4:45. Thank you very much for everyone attending today. Thanks a lot. Bye for now.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.